All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to my show, A Gift from Adversity. Today we have a wonderful guest. His name is Herbie Mack. And Herbie and I met, and we had some podcast. He interviewed me before. And I'm very, very excited to have him today for my show. This is my second episode um, of A Gift from Adversity. So, Herbie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me as a guest. I'm honored, truly.
Wonderful. Can you please tell your name and then what you do to our audience?
Yes, sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Herbie Mack. I am a suicide prevention speaker, also coach as well, and I am the host of the Just Believe podcast, where we normalize conversations about mental health challenges and also give out alternatives, routes, just in case you want to know, like, hey, let me try this out. So that's what I do.
Great. So, Herbie, today um, we want to talk about adversity. So this show I started because I published a book called A Gift from Adversity. And A Gift from Adversity is available on Amazon and different platforms. But I wanted to write this book because I'm a survivor of child sex abuse and domestic violence, bullying, and homelessness. So I wanted to title it is as a gift because adversity is obviously hard. It is very traumatic, but there's something that maybe we can learn from adversity. So that's why I intentionally put it's a gift. So let's actually find out what was your adversity growing up, or if you can tell, feel free to not tell and tell our audience. So, what is your adversity?
So I'm originally from the Bronx. Growing up there, I'm originally from the South Bronx. So growing up there, I saw a lot from as far as uh drive-bys, gang related stuff. Also like, where I was at, crack was like heavy. So being there and trying not to be a product of my environment, I leaned towards other things. Instead of being in the streets, I decided to lean towards like studying, being in the books and whatnot. During the time my mom and dad was like really on me about, school, the importance of school. And growing up in that scenario and having some friends that are no longer around because of the street life, it taught me to tighten up and get into books. But then also growing up, I also seen a lot of negative things as I stated, as far as like death. One of the deaths that affected me was like I had a cousin passing and whatnot. Well, he didn't get passed; he got murdered. And when he got murdered, unfortunately, I had to identify his body, and that was like trauma right there. And then shortly after that, about 2, 3 years later, I had a sister who died from cancer. So it was a lot. It was a lot for me to take on. Um, and when you're a young child, a teenager, like I was like 12 when the first one happened, and I was about 14, 15 when my sister died. So it was a lot for me. And I started having a disconnect with myself as far as like whom I am, the meaning of life. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. I was always wanting to talk to my parents about it and whatnot. And it was rough, it was rough. It led me down a path of suicidal ideation and whatnot. Trying to figure out who you are when you're a teenager, when you started high school. So it was a lot to take on. Um, yeah, so it was a lot. It was a lot to take on, and I had to learn how to communicate. And I want to shout out my grandma because she was always the one who was checking in on me and checking in and telling me about like depression and how it's important to express yourself and how it's important to believe in yourself and believe that you can get out this funk.
So, it's a lot happened when you are growing up, and how did that lead to maybe a deep depression and some attempts that you kind of openly talk about?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It led to a lot. It led to my depression because I didn't know how to, one, I didn't know my emotions. I didn't know how to express myself. So in a sense of like expressing, like to talk, I didn't know how to do that. But my habits was like showing, like my behavior, I should say, not my, but my habits, but my behavior was changing in the sense of like not really caring how I dressed, didn't really want to get a haircut, didn't really care about a lot, let alone wanting to wash and whatnot. And I think that was the first signs of me being depressed, and then really having the suicidal ideation of contemplating of, ending my life. And luckily, my grandma did have that talk, and I got out of it at a young age. So I was just like, it has to be more than life. I'm tired of being in the projects and tired of living this lifestyle. Let me move. And so I did. I moved. I got everything all together, and I moved to the state of Florida in Tampa. And no one tells you when you're a kid that your problems go with you. Yeah, you left the situation, but your problems still come with you. So I had to learn how to adjust with that.
So, were there, besides grandma, were there anybody who you were able to kind of talk to, or nobody? Like friend, counselor, like school teacher?
No, so it's gonna sound, and where I'm growing up, where I grew up at, no one talked about therapy. It was something like whatever stays in this house, whatever happens in this house stays in this house. So for me, my outlet was basketball, right? Because that was the only thing I felt like I can control. If I sucked at it, it's because I wasn't putting enough work in it. If I was decent at it, I was, it was stuff that I can actually control. I felt like I had no control of my life outside of basketball. So my talking to was my coaches and my teammates and my friends. So I talked to them, but it's hard to put pressure on other kids. Like, we just shared each other like issues and like, hey, you know what? I'm going through this, I'm going through that. And we cope with playing video games or shooting hoops. That's what we did.
So, how would you describe that now you started this podcast, that you are maybe learning a lot by doing this podcast? And then just tell our audience a little bit more about your podcast, how you started, why you started, and how people can find out about your podcast. Where can they go?
Sure, no problem. So I started my podcast because I'm a multiple time suicide survivor. So when I was struggling and I was going through my depression and my suicidal ideation and attempts, I had no idea like who I can go to, where can I find information. I didn't want to share my story. I wasn't comfortable sharing it. I was just like, hey, let me just start reposting people's stuff and share it. And I couldn't find anyone that sounded like me, nor that looked like me. That was relatable. So I said, well, I got to become that person. And on the journey of the podcast, I interview not only people who had experience and overcome their trauma, but I also interview pros, is what I call them, the doctors, the psychiatrists, the counselors, because I want to normalize therapy, because the stigma is like, they're not going to really help me out. They're just wasting my time. But I want to show people that they actually do help. And my podcast is also available everywhere on YouTube. It's also available on uh, Apple, StreamYard, everywhere. It's like everywhere. Anywhere you want to find it, you can find it. I guarantee it.
So, Just Believe is the title
Yes,
of
the
your
Just Believe podcast.
Just Believe podcast. How did you come up with this podcast name?
Um, yeah, oh man, that's easy. Well, may I tell my story?
Yeah, of course. Please.
Perfect. All right, I'm just gonna get into it. Waking up to the sound of someone banging at my door. And as I open the door, I realize it's my ex-girlfriend, trying to figure out why she's here. Instantly, she's like, ugh, Herbie, why do you look like that? Why do you smell like that? Hello, are you going to answer me? I'm trying to decide if I should tell her the truth, because every male told me I can't be weak, I can't be vulnerable. I got to man up, got to be strong. And then she uttered these words, I love you, I'm here for you. So I decided to tell her the truth. This is the third day in a row I attempted suicide. And honestly, it would have been the fourth if you didn't come knocking. She starts crying. She hands me the phone, tells me to call the suicide lifeline number. So I did. As I'm on the phone, I'm speaking to the counselor. She's saying, sir, on a scale to 1 to 10, how do you feel today? As I replied to -10. And honestly, this is the first time in my life I don't trust myself by myself. So she recommended I check myself into a mental health facility. So I did. After a while, I get evaluated by a couple of nurses. One of the male nurses stopped me and said, "Hey, sir, I don't know if you believe in God or not, but you don't belong here. I've been doing this for a while. You don't belong here. He gonna use you to share your story to touch other people's lives." At the time, I had no idea what he was talking about. Honestly, I just wanted my pillow, my blanket, and head to my room to cry because no one thinks about attempting suicide, let alone checking himself into a mental health facility. A few moments later, I get evaluated by the psychiatrist who's running it. He glances at my file and says, "Oh, okay, from the Bronx. All right, this is the issue. Here, take this." At that moment, I realized I had a voice. I decided to use it. Take what? I don't even know what this is. And he says, "Wait a moment." Looks at my file again and says, "You're from the Bronx." So people from the Bronx have a low IQ. They can't really read or write that well. So I'm be honest with you. You have bipolar. So if you take this, you'll be fine. I just want to let you know, if people who ever throw labels on you, please tell them labels are made for jars, not people. After I rejected it, I decided to go back to the nurses because they got me. They was communicating with me. So I asked the nurse, "Hey, is there any other ways that I can help me with this depression?" And he said, "Sure, try writing." So I started writing. As I write, and I realized the trigger of my depression is my parents, for the fact that they didn't teach me how to love myself. Here I am dating someone else, hoping that they can teach me how to love myself. Sounds weird every time I think about it, but it's true. And also, as I kept writing, I realized I was a functional alcoholic. I was only drinking to numb my pain instead of facing my pain. A few days passed by. Luckily, another psychiatrist comes, reevaluates everything, and says, "You don't have bipolar. You're just depressed. You need therapy." I'm not gonna lie to you, Juri. Your boy was broke. Okay, I was broke. So when I got home, the first thing I did was use Google how to love yourself, and I discovered something called positive affirmations. Since I was in dire need, I just got sticky notes and placed them everywhere, from my bedroom to the mirror in my bathroom to the refrigerator to even in my car. And then I also discovered something called positive talk. I didn't even know what that was. So I did something I never done before. I looked in the mirror, told myself, "You are loved, you are smart. You can change the world, but first you have to just believe in yourself." Some of my friends found out that I left the place and they wanted to turn up and celebrate because my nickname was Anything Possible, for the fact that I love Hennessy. And I discovered something called boundaries. I had to tell them, "Look, man, I love you, but I got to love you from afar, because once I start drinking, I turn into the Incredible Hulk and I can't control them." They didn't get it, but they love me, so they stayed away. And if you're wondering about that ex-girlfriend that came knocking on my door, now she's my wife, blessed me with two beautiful kids. I share my stories because I personally went from hopelessness to happiness. And I share it because I want you to do the same.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's very, it feels like I'm watching some kind of movie, but it's your life. And it's true story. And then I'm glad you survived that. And then I'm very happy that you are openly talking about it and then decided to share with the world. And then having this guest, I was honored to be one of your guests. And you also talk about African American men, especially, that was kind of biased that they shouldn't talk about it and just, maybe take it in. But I think you're giving a platform. I have several friends who came on your show, and then they all said they had a great experience with you. So by having this guests and then doing the podcast, do you think it's kind of healing to you as well? Is it healing you as well as audience and guests? Do you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Honestly, for me, learning learning about trauma, right? Like, this is topics can be hard, obviously, but it helps me in a sense to understand people, right? Learning how to listen to understand and not listen to reply, because when you are struggling, sometimes the best thing to do is listen, right? And then when I do listen to the guests that speak, I learn so much, right? Based off of some of the techniques that they use. right? Like the episode that I'm gonna release next week is with Milton Young, right? And he was struggling with depression, and he went to learn jiu-jitsu. How do you say it? Jiu-jitsu? I always say it wrong, but he went to learn like martial arts, and it helped him out as a coping method, and it taught him discipline, and it also taught him how to believe in himself and confidence. So it's like something like that. I would never think like martial arts would teach you that. So like that's something that I learned. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So when I do interview people, I love the fact that they can be themselves. If they don't, if there's a topic that they don't want to talk about, like if it's too triggering, hey, we don't got to talk about it. But I learn a lot, to be honest with you. But also like engage in conversations with them, they learn from me as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, how many episodes have you had so far?
So far, I have out right now. I have 29. 29. I took a break. I always tell people about self care, and I'm a massive advocate, and I like to practice what I preach. Life can be overwhelming, whether you 9 to 5. Obviously the pandemic, and it was overwhelming for me. I was feeling like I was drowning, and I had to tell people like I have to take a break. Mentally, I'm not there. Some one of some of my listeners had DM me like, "Hey, you're dropping out an episode," and I just had to be honest. And it's like I can't. Like, yeah, I understand you're looking forward to it, which I'm truly honored, but I'm mentally unstable. I have to get back focused. I have to get back to the Herbie Mack that I am, and they love it. They love the fact that I'm open and honest with them, because I take mental health so serious, and I want them to take it too. But also like now the podcast is actually changing, which I think not changing but growing. How about that? Because as people, we grow every day, and I'm gonna start teaching people things that help me out and whatnot. So it's gonna be a lot of solo episodes. Actually, one is gonna drop. A new solo episode is gonna drop tomorrow, and it's about the celebration of me being sober for 4 years and learning that I am not my addiction.
That's really powerful. And, I think what impressed me with you um, is just, vulnerability and then being brave and then being advocate for not you, but others to create this platform. And, you know, that's what I wanted to do as well for starting the show, A Gift from Adversity, where, for instance, the last episode that I interviewed, Deidre Eldridge, that she is a survivor of active shooting twice. And then she said all of a sudden people stopped talking about it. And she didn't know where to talk or how people will feel. So she appreciated me for creating the safe um, space that she can share. And then I think what you are doing is extremely important because mental health is something that people shy away talking about. Suicidal attempt. I tried to kill myself when I was 15 after I experienced sexual abuse from my dad, and then I was not believed when I told my mom. So, you know, I think, you know, I never really heard of counseling or like mental health until I came to America. I never heard of PTSD. So, really educating, I think a lot of people are starting to talk about it more, especially during the pandemic and everything. But from your perspective, being sober for 4 years and doing this podcast, what is and then learning from other people doing this almost 30 episodes, what is your biggest take on that you can share for as far as tips and advice if people are going through maybe suicidal thoughts or being very depressed? What is your biggest advice to them?
Don't be scared to ask for help, to be honest. It's the stigma of asking for help makes you weak, and it's not. It's actually, it makes you strong. It shows you self-awareness. It shows that, hey, I need some help. And I think that's what I had to learn, right? If it wasn't for that ex-girlfriend that came knocking on my door, I didn't ask for help at all. But she was the help that I needed. and I was comfortable enough to realize I do need help, and you have to be comfortable to accept it.
So if not the professional, like somebody else that you reach out first and then ask for help, what if that help is rejected? Like my case, my first person that I confided, I was rejected. I was told a liar, and that broke me. And then, like, what should we do for that kind of
Oh, yeah.
situation?
No, I had a situation like that. Also I was talking to my close friends, and I was telling them, and they laughed, not in the sense of like that's funny. They laughed because they didn't know how to handle it. And some people, when they reject you, they don't know how to handle it, and they may not be prepared for it. But that's why you keep going until somebody hears you, because your voice needs to be heard, because you are loved and you are special.
So right now, how are you doing mentally? How is your mental
Right.
health?
Uh,
So
it's
there's
right now. It's
mental wealth and mental health.
yes. Right now, to be honest with you, I'm probably 6 or 7, right? But
10. Mhm.
yeah, out of 10, the 6 or 7, and honestly, it's a lot because people may not know I'm a father of two young kids at the same time. I got a 4-year-old and 1-year-old, so they keep me going. But also, really trying to keep up, but then learning that I'm where I'm at, where I need to be. Like this is, sometimes we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves, and that's what I was doing. And I had to learn how to, uh, you know, change my perspective. So right now, yeah, I'll say like a 7. I'm at a 7. I just need, some sleep. But when you have two young kids, it catches up sooner or later. But I'm at a 7. But yeah, I'm at a 7, and I learned how to communicate, right? Not only to like my wife, but to myself. And like, hey, you need to dial it back just a little bit. Whether it's your goals and your expectations, or hey, it's okay to sleep in. It's okay to take a break. It's okay if you didn't post that podcast today. Guess what? When you can post it, you can post it.
Yes. So I want to switch a little bit towards a gift part of it. So my show is a gift from adversity. So, and that's title of my book. And to be honest with you, after I published my book, a lot of people reached out to me and then confided their abuse, sexual abuse, trauma. And then I learned what is it? What's the gift part of it? And then to me, it's this perspective that I learned, and then humbleness. And I remember my counselor was saying, white is brighter next to black. And the metaphor of if you haven't experienced these adversities, that the happiness that you have maybe is degraded. Now, I just got on the movie with Superstars, Don't Look Up. And thank you. With the hard work to put in with my son, you know, I was just crying when I was in the theater and then watching myself and my son. And I started to think about the moment that I had to kill myself. And now was this huge stars in this number one most watched movie on Netflix, like top 10 in 94 countries. It's surreal. But at the same time, I don't think I would have cried or be touched or moved by it if I didn't really have these experiences. So my gift is really truly the moment that I can deeply, deeply appreciate the success or joy.
Yeah.
So how about you?
Nah, I love it. If it wasn't for pain, you would never understand joy. I love it. For me, my gift is the power of vulnerability, to be honest with you. I think being a male, we have that stigma of being manly, and I'm okay with being vulnerable, and it still makes you manly. I tell people that all the time. Yeah, I would say vulnerability, and then learning how to communicate with self and with others. Learning that. right? And learning like, oh, okay, I'm not feeling myself today. What are the steps that I have to do to be myself? As far as like writing, sitting down, being, the gratitude journal, um, meditating. Even if meditating is different for everyone, you don't have to sit there and meditate with the crisscross applesauce. You could just sit in silence and just be like, hey, this is it. And also learning to move, right? The exercising. You don't have to sit there and work out until you look like The Rock. You could sit there and just do a 20-minute walk. That helps out. Also, just jamming out to some music if that is therapeutic too, and learning when to use those coping skills. I always tell everyone we all should have coping skills, and if one don't work, learn how to use the other one.
Yes, absolutely. I truly appreciate you like learning and sharing and surviving from it. And how did you celebrate the fourth anniversary? Like, was there a certain date that you remember that, oh, this
So,
is the fourth anniversary?
um, yeah. So honestly, once my daughter was born, like I was pretty much done. The what is it? New Year's Eve, like was like my last drink, but I was gonna post it on New Year's, but everybody with the Happy New Year's, and I was like, I'll just wait till Monday. And how I celebrated, your boy got a Cold Stone ice cream, and yeah, we had to eat. Okay, yeah.
I love those
you
songs.
know, got to get it. You have to enjoy the things in life. But honestly, once I became sober, the sky looks a different color blue. I think life becomes different once you realize the value of it. With the suicidal ideation and the attempts, you appreciate it. As you said, like that moment, I'm pretty sure as soon as you saw you on the big screen, oh, tears of joy came out. Like, wow, here I was like years ago in this dark place, and now look at me. Life is beautiful.
You never know, right?
You never know. Yeah, I always tell people life is a beautiful struggle. You don't understand it, right? You don't appreciate the struggle until you overcome it, and you're like, wow, I was at this dark place, and now look at me. So takes time. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Treat your inner child perfectly. Treat it fine. I have a picture in my office of myself when I'm 3, and even though like I don't, sometimes we talk to ourselves negative, and as soon as I start having those negative thoughts, I go right to that picture and start talking to that kid. Like, hey, if I won't say it to a kid, why would I say it to myself? Is one of the things that I learned.
That's a really great metaphor. I think my primary care doctor told me about this website, selfcompassion.org. And he was telling me, you have to tell something to yourself as if you're telling that word to your best friend. So you don't tell your best friend bad things, and then why would you say that to yourself? And then we do it, we beat ourselves. And then I don't know why, how, but I think a lot of times self-esteem is definitely, developed thing and by the education. And in my case was extreme abuse and domestic violence witnessing, and how can you overcome that, right? So again, both of us went through very hardship growing up, not being able to share or advocate for yourself. But I think you and I both found a way to somehow not only advocate for ourselves, but for others, creating these platforms. And I think, you know, it is something, not a counseling, but something that is therapeutic. And then in a way, it's kind of healing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, yeah, I agree with you. It is. Once it's like the stories. Once you put your own oxygen mask on, and you realize like, oh wow, now I can assist others, and I can learn from others and teach others. Hey, this worked for me. Try it out. I recently had someone that I was just talking to, like a good friend, and they was in a negative place, and I was just like, hey, why would you talk to yourself like that? And he's like, well, I'm beating myself up. And I told him the same thing I just told you. Take a picture, look at your kid, picture of your kid, whether it's your actual kid or your inner self, right? And he said he got a picture of him when he was like 10, and he started talking to that kid, and it helped out so much. He said, "I don't think I'm ever going to talk to myself negative." And I said, "That's the point, because negative talk is self harm. Negative self talk is self harm, and I think a lot of people don't understand that."
Negative self-talk is self-harm.
Yes, it
That's a
is.
mouthful, but it's
But it's true. When you talk to yourself negative, that's self harm. Why would you do that to yourself? So speak to yourself positive.
I don't know why we do this, but a lot of us do, and you know that leads us to depression. And how can we talk ourselves out of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know we're gonna wrap it up soon, but
Yeah.
it's something else that I do. I call this release writing, right? Sometimes we hold on to things so much, and it's like we don't need to hold on to it. So I would write as like fast as I can, whatever the emotion is. Like if it's anger, I'm just gonna keep writing, and I may not even be able to read it. And after I finish writing it, I either do two things: I tear it up and just throw it away, or I burn it, right? Because I don't need to hold on to that emotion, because that emotion is draining. And once you burn it, you don't think about it anymore. It's gone. Let it go.
That is a really great technique. Maybe I have to do that.
Try it. Try it. You'll thank yourself. I promise.
Great. Well, Herbie, I truly appreciate you supporting my new show, A Gift from Adversity, and coming on my show. You're my second guest. I'm so honored. And I really admire you and support you like 200%. And, I'm very grateful that we became friends and then we're in touch. And keep it going and keep winning. And I truly appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for listening to our show, A Gift from Adversity. We'll see you next time.